Giant monsters summoned from the depths of the unknown. Horrific hell creatures to menace all of mankind. They walk, they kill. From the mad minds that brought you An Occurrence at Howling Crater and Jungle Tomb of the Mummy Bride, Planet X Games is back, and they're here once again to put the grind back in Grindhouse, this time with their brand new Kickstarter, Escape from Skullcano Island. Escape from Skullcano Island is a brand new high-level adventure module for 5th edition to challenge even the most experienced and stalwart adventurers. Something terrible is happening on this strange prehistoric place, and the fate of all mankind rests on the shoulders of those few daring enough to brave it. Dare you face these gigantic monsters that seek to obliterate mankind and crush the kingdoms of man under their clawed feet. So join us on this titanic thrill ride of kaiju-rific adventure and check out Escape from Skullcano Island by Planet X Games, May 11th on Kickstarter.
This is the Vintage RPG Podcast, your source for the best in classic and contemporary RPGs. With your hosts, Hambone and Stu.
Welcome to the Vintage RPG Podcast, coming at you again from the clubhouse, hidden somewhere in the swamps of New Jersey. I'm John Hambone McGuire, and with me, as always, is the editor-in-chief of Unwinnable.com. He can see what a knife's meant to be, Stu Horvath.
Is that like a song reference?
It's a lyric from Iron Maiden's Killers.
Oh, jeez. I don't know the lyrics to that album by heart. That would just soar right over my head. I'm sure that somebody's laughing, though.
Someone's into it, and, you know, if you don't love Iron Maiden, I don't know if I can love you. However, all of that said, today we're talking about a weird RPG that I had never heard of up until now, and it ties into the joke. So, Stu, what are we talking about today?
We're talking about Killer, the game of assassination from Steve Jackson Games, which is actually not a Steve Jackson Games game.
Okay, wait, hold on a second here. So, first and foremost, Steve Jackson's games, Munchkin, the Munchkin game that I love to play so much, that dude made a game about assassinating people.
Yes, in real life.
Whoa, okay, that's a twist.
Yeah, the game itself is called Assassin, and it was developed sort of in the 1960s, mid-60s at college campuses. It was like, you know, it sort of came up spontaneously in a bunch of places. And the idea is that you and a bunch of your friends, everybody gets a target, and you go out and over the course of the next week or so, you murder them.
Oh.
Well, not really. you murder them with squirt guns and dart guns and maybe dropping a pillow on their head and saying it was an anvil.
Okay.
Yeah, so live action, you know, free-for-all murder simulator.
So it's a murder LARP.
Yeah, it's a murder LARP. Long time before LARPing as like a really formalized concept existed. And what Killer is a codification of those rules into book 4. Before the Killer was published, it just sort of existed as like the same way that Tag did. You don't buy a book to learn how to play Tag, right?
Right, it's all hush-hush, word of mouth.
Yeah, same thing with Assassin. Killer is the rule book that kind of makes it a much more well-known kind of game.
Well, not well enough, because I didn't hear about it until like now.
You know, I had heard of it. I always wanted to play it, but I always also thought it was a terrible idea. Like even back, you know,
pre 9/11.
Yeah, like it always seemed like a bad idea because basically what it requires you to do is to sneak up on people and shoot them with a toy gun. But still, to an innocent bystander, this might be distressing and they might involve the police.
Well, yeah. Could you imagine going to the supermarket and you're in like the produce department and you're feeling up the melons, and the next thing you know, bang, you're dead in front of like someone's grandma? She was there to buy prunes. She did not go to the supermarket for this.
Yeah. And like, for instance, if we were to set up a game, it would be awesome. It would be so much fun to like have everybody in our friend group in North Jersey kind of just play this game because we're actually all spread out. So it would take a little bit of work to get into position to kill people. And like I was thinking about it before we got online just now to talk about it, that the best way to kill me, I'm always in my office working. So like you have like one shot and it's when I go and get the mail. So like if you, Hambone, were like, I'm going to go out, Stu is my target, you would hide where the garbage cans are next to my front steps. And when I came out to get the mail out of the mailbox, you would just put a dart in the back of my head. Now, totally cool, right? Like, I would just be like, "Oh,
No.
damn it. Oh, man." And, like, you would just be like, "I got you," and it would be amazing. But my neighbor Andrew, or the guy across the street, would be on the phone like nobody's business. Probably before I even got out there, he'd be like, "Some weird guy's hanging out in Stu's garbage cans."
Yeah, and I don't want to end up on the business end of the Kearney Police Department, you know? Jesus.
I mean, of all the police departments in North Jersey, Kearney's probably the one you have to worry about the least.
I don't want to take my chances and find out. And let's be honest with you, Stu. Like, I got to be real for a second here. I would never get my hands dirty. I would outsource it to Jerry and just have him leave a crayon on the stairs again.
What Killer does, what Steve Jackson's game does, is it gives you a whole bunch of thought and, rules and stuff that I don't know if they really existed before Killer came out. So, like, as a university game, it was like a squirt gun game, but this introduces rules for, like, how to burn down somebody's house.
Wait, whoa. Oh, slow down. Arson?
Yeah.
In the fake Killer game.
Yes.
All right.
So arson is accomplished by taking, rolls of crepe paper. So you take the crepe paper and you have to string it all the way around the house and complete it without tearing it. Like, really hard physical challenge, but if you do it, the house burns down and the people inside are killed.
What? Well, I'm still trying to wrap my head around Munchkin guy. And here's how you commit arson, air quotes, allegedly, in pretend. What?
Yeah. I mean, in fairness, Steve Jackson Games also created a tactical board game called Raid on Iran in 1980, right after the Iran hostage crisis, like basically as like a simulation of what would have happened if we sent the troops in. So, like,
Oh my.
there's also, yeah, I own it. And it's sort of like every time I look at it, I'm just like, ooh, I understand what they were trying to do there, but there's a reason we don't.
That's a choice. That's a flex.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. But, he's always embraced sort of fringe stuff in a fun and interesting way. The New World Order stuff, the conspiracy games, and the Discordian Handbook. He has like a pretty varied and interesting history of like the stuff that he's into.
Oh, clearly.
And I think Killer is a really clear example of that. And like, it looks like such a fun game. And it is. Everything about this game is like lighthearted and fun, and it indulges like all of your action movie fantasies, and you read it, you start coming up with the catchphrases for how you kill people. Like, I remember our friend Brian Kirst went to school in Rochester, and he was almost involved in a game. I don't think it ever came off, but he told us about it. We're just like, oh, we should do it. And at the time I had like long hair and I always wore a trench coat or whatever. And I was just like, we should play this. And in my head, I'm just like, I will shave my head and I will start wearing Hawaiian shirts and no one will find me.
Oh my God.
And it's just like the excitement of being able to just like kill your buddy and then, reveal that. It's palpable in the text. But then there's the amazingly obvious downside is that it's asking to be, at the very least, what do you call it? Like a menace to
A public menace.
Yeah, like a public menace charge or something like that. Like, for instance, like one of the things in the book is like you just leave a briefcase in somebody's room, and like if they open it, there's an index card that says bomb on it. And like, haha, I got you, you exploded. Yeah, I get that. But if you're not the person in on the game who opens that, you're going to freak the hell out.
Oh, yeah. I mean, could you imagine that at like a college now? Forget it.
No, forget it. But, every time I think about this game, I think like, oh, this is such a game that cannot be played anymore. But like, even more so now that we're in a pandemic, it just seems like everything that surrounds this game and makes it fun just seems so remote. Like normal life, being able to walk around and ambush your friends. Like, I can't even imagine that anymore.
You can't even hug people right now, dude. I mean,
Yeah.
much less shoot them with a squirt gun or drop a pillow on their head from like the second floor of your friend's apartment.
Yeah, it's like we're all in a high security lockdown. Like we're all high value targets.
Every single one of us. And apparently the invisible virus is winning. So,
Yeah.
shit. I mean, I can 100% see why in 2020 I have not heard of this game and why there's probably not a ton of mention about it online, especially that other Iran game that you were talking about, which is like a very like, that's a moment in time. That's a snapshot of like when they used to make the stickers of Ron Reagan, but as Rambo, and it was Ronbo. My grandmother used to have those all over her apartment. She loved Reagan. It was the 80s, there was Diet Pepsi and stuff. It was the thing.
And Raid on Iran came out in 1980 and Killer came out in 1981. So like it's right at the same time.
Yeah, it's bonkers. I can see though why in 2020 I wouldn't hear about this game, because I'd imagine that this is not something that the federal government would really want being passed around and putting ideas in people's heads at this point. I mean, I remember shit in the late 90s, early 2000s, like, anyone who still had an anarchist cookbook, I was edgy. This is some next level stuff, because even though it's a game, I mean, you are talking about theory on how to assassinate and murder your friends.
Yeah, I mean, it's still in the realm of a potboiler thriller. I can't entirely fight you on that, but it's a firmly tongue-in-cheek, lighthearted game. And people do still play it. Some universities have assassins guilds on campus that run a game, and it's usually like a week or two. I think Oxford has one.
Oh, that tracks the Ivy League. I mean, Jesus Christ. I will tell you, it sounds like a CBS TV show. Like, okay, this is what's going to happen tonight on Magnum PI, the assassin game.
Well, there are actually several movies that use assassin as a plot point.
Really?
Yeah, well, there's a game actually called Tag the Assassination Game with Robert Carradine and Linda Hamilton in it.
Oh, wow.
And then there's another one in 1985 called Gotcha, starring Anthony Edwards.
Goose.
And what's the name of it? Terrible Tim Allen movie.
Well, I mean, all you had to say was Tim Allen movie. It's implied that it's terrible, but go on.
Big Trouble, 2002. Squirt guns appear in an assassination context. But yeah, you're totally right. It feels like, oh, I remember that episode of the A-Team.
Yeah, seriously. It's a Simon and Simon special, two-parter crossover with Magnum and Murder, She Wrote. In the 80s, though, it had to be like a little crazier, because for those who are younger listening to this program, in the 80s, and I don't say this to be condescending, I'm saying that they don't do this anymore. There were squirt guns that looked like real guns. Like, they had no problem stocking on the shelves of Toys R Us. Oh, this is a 45. Sure, it's a squirt gun, but it's all black. And at night, who's to say what you actually have in your hand?
Yeah, and that's where I kind of go that makes this so unfeasible, because I remember the era of squirt guns and dart guns that actually looked like real guns. My nephew has a bin of giant Nerf guns. Like, yeah, sure, they're Dayglow orange, but they still look like guns.
Yo, they hurt, dude. They hurt seriously. Like, those springs are like really, really powerful. You get shot in the ass with one of those, you're going to feel it. It might leave a welt. And they actually make like the darts look like actual bullets now with like regular clips.
Yeah, it's a strange game for, honestly, a very strange world. But the cleverness, it's just like you put Tabasco sauce in somebody's food and like they taste it and they're like, oh man, this is so spicy. And then you get to say, I poisoned you, you're dead.
Oh, that's pretty fucking funny.
Like, it's so cool.
Yeah, that is kind of funny. And I mean, knowing our friends who really can't handle spicy stuff, there's a duality to it.
Yeah.
Where you are actually kind of poisoning them.
Yeah. But you can still play this in a closed setting. Like, I could see this being fun, I guess, at like a camp or like the university setting, kind of, if it's really highly controlled and everybody knows about it. There was a similar thing that happened 10 years ago where they had like the zombie thing on campuses.
Right.
Like, there's certain people who are zombies and they get to infect you and see who wins at the end of the 2 weeks. But like, that also strips out some of the grandness of getting somebody at the corner newsstand or when they're buying their morning bagel.
Well, it takes the dangerousness out of it, which I think really is the spirit and the fun of the game. It sounds like at any given point, you can get got. You know what I mean? Like, there's something that is really like edgy and mysterious about that, and it makes me think to myself, like, hey, I mean, I don't really want to play this game, but if I was going to play this game, I would want to have to be on high alert at all times. Like, I mean, I imagine there's got to be like car bomb rules and stuff. I'd be like looking under my car with a mirror to see if there was like a stick of gum under there or something. I don't know. I'm just spitballing here because now you got my brain going.
Yeah, but you're totally right. I think that the whole point of the game is to foster sort of like a nonstop feeling of paranoia. And I think it does it really effectively and in a fun way, but it also it's like a really specific kind of thing. Like, I'm not sure, like, you don't want to do this.
No, I don't want to do this. I'm already like riddled with anxiety baseline. Like,
yeah,
I mean, maybe in like my early 20s when I was like drinking and like out all the time. But then again, I'm like, but then how would I be able to really enjoy having a beer if at any given time I'd have to worry about you like popping around the corner and being like, I poisoned you.
Yeah, I think this says something about the fundamental difference between you and me is like, I know that this game would make me absolutely insane. It would turn me into a crazy person, but I'm really curious about what that would feel like. Like I would be like the crazy guy in Stranger Things. I would be like locked in the house and like speaking Russian, like
Well, you would take time to learn Russian because you wouldn't be leaving the house for weeks while this was going on. You'd have to find a hobby.
yeah, exactly.
So is this a sore spot or a blemish for Steve Jackson Games? I mean, again, I've not heard of it until now, so I'd imagine that this is something that maybe they don't want so publicly known.
No, I mean, I think that was reprinted up until, the late 90s, which is, says something.
Well, that's ambitious. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's an accepted part of the history. I think that it was always a game that was sort of limited in its appeal. But I also think that, like, Steve Jackson Games can't really take credit or feel shame because they didn't make it up. Like, they just kind of codified the rules that existed out there as like a folk game. And they did this too with the Principia Discordia, which is sort of like Discordians are like a joke religion, and they have like this public domain religious text. And the most easily accessible version of that for a long time was Steve Jackson's. They published it because it was in the public domain, and he thought Discordians were hilarious. And that book is hilarious.
I would love to pick his brain about all this.
So would I.
So weird, so cool. I myself am too anxious for a game like this. I'm going to stick with Munchkin. Stu, do you have any final thoughts on Killer?
Yeah, Hambone, I would just be very careful when you leave that room.
Stu, you know I'm easily frightened.
I set something up. Even with this pandemic and the lockdown, I finagled something.
You know what, man? I don't even know what I fear more, whatever you could have possibly set up and finagled, or the Duplo minefield that awaits me in the living room where my goddaughter was just playing. So I think I'm going to take my chances with whatever you got cooked up.
Fair enough.
Stu, where can the people find you?
They could find me at Vintage RPG on Instagram every day, posting about games like Killer.
Very cool. You can find me on Twitter at Handbreaker. I tweet about cute animals. I tweet about Dungeons & Dragons. I tweet about professional wrestling. You can follow my day-to-day adventures in podcasting and in life over on Instagram at John Hambone McGuire. Make sure you take a second and join the Vintage RPG Discord. We've got a lot of cool conversation going on there at all times. And if you want to join our Patreon, patreon.com/vintagerpg, we do put out some bonus content on there. You do get early release episodes, and we're even running games on our Discord for our patrons. So definitely think about checking that out. So for Stu Horvath, I'm John Hambone McGuire. May the dice always roll in your favor.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, review, and subscribe to the podcast. Every review helps other listeners to find us. The Vintage RPG Podcast is a ham-fisted production. Music by Dego West. Art by Schaefer Brown. If you like the podcast, you should also consider becoming a patron at patreon.com.